You are now listening to the Minority Trailblazer podcast. Let the story begin.
One time for the lovers, 2 times for the ladies, 3 times for the brothers, 4 times for the babies. Do you love her? 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 1 time for the lovers, 2 times for the ladies, 3 times for the brothers, 4 times for the babies. Do you love her? 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 Brown skin, love her brown skin, love her brown. Brown skin, love her brown skin, love her brown. She my brown skin, love her brown skin, love her brown. She my brown skin, love her brown skin. Hold me down.
Welcome to the Minority Trailblazer podcast. It's your host, Greg Ehill, the culture change agent. It's episode 95. We 5 episodes away from 100. I'm starting to think about what special am I going to do for 100. I don't know. Hopefully y'all can shoot me some ideas, but first and foremost, I want to say a special shout out to all my people in the 30-day challenge. We out here getting it in, making our goals become a reality. Whether that be losing weight, launching websites, getting AFL clients. Like, we have a variety of different people with a variety of different goals, and we are getting it done. So shout out to everybody that signed up for the 30-day challenge. Also, get ready. Sometime in November, we're launching Trailblazers University. More information will be coming. I'm excited about it. It's going to be a platform that's really going to change a lot of lives. Going to bring the community into this whole Trailblazer Nation feel, adding a lot of resources in regards to financing, real estate, motivation, speaking, podcasting, writing, you name it, we got it. Not just deliver for myself, deliver for minority change agents all across the country / world. So I'm pumped up about that project, so be on the lookout for that. Also, if you've been listening to this podcast faithfully, make sure you leave a review, share it with a friend, leave comments. We will be having the Instagram back up and active pretty soon. And feel free to shoot me a message on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, by any means, man. Show the love for the episodes, ask questions, connect with our guests, connect with myself, and let's continue to push the culture forward. That's all I really got for today. I don't have no products. I don't got no books to sell. I don't got nothing to push. I'm just excited to be back on the podcast, back on the show. And please keep our North Carolina family and our Florida family in prayers as we are getting hit by another, yes, I said it, another hurricane. So, hope you enjoyed today's episode. It's Thursday. Yep, I didn't make it till Friday. We getting it on time Thursday. Enjoy the show and continue to change the culture. On this show, we interview young, successful minorities in a variety of fields to educate, empower, and inspire our current and future generation leaders. And as always, I got a show for you today. I'm going to try to be brief with this bio, but she has worked at so many places and worked with so many people that it's going to be hard for me to get brief, so bear with me. So she began a career in fashion when she left her native Minneapolis to join Menswear Daily as an intern in New York. She quickly moved on to Victoria's Secret's headquarters, where she assisted on the legendary 2008 and 2009 fashion shows that starred the iconic Victoria's Secret Angels. Using her natural gift for editorial storytelling, she then joined Essence magazine as a fashion/beauty editorial assistant. This experience led to a stint at the HL Group, managing prestige fragrances and skincare accounts. Next came a return to the print world as the associate beauty and grooming editor at Ebony magazine. She then dived into the world of e-commerce, serving as the senior women's editor at Gilt, responsible for creating compelling content for top luxury fashion and beauty brands, including DFV, Kate Spade New York, Louis Vuitton, and Janelle. Most recently, she was the BET's Digital Beauties editor, overseeing news coverage and creating original content for the New Style vertical. Additionally, she wrote original beauty pieces for notable digital publications, including the Cover Tour, Caster, Allure, Self, Teen Vogue, Man Repeller, and many, many others. And now she is currently based in Brooklyn, New York, and she currently works as a full-time beauty and wellness writer and branding consultant. I know that was a mouthful. She's worked with a lot of great companies, and I'm just excited to kind of get her experiences and kind of share what she's working on now and everything else. So it's going to be a great show. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Janell Hickman to the Minority Trailblazer podcast. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks, Greg. I'm excited.
Now I'm excited too. I had no choice but to be excited through that bio. Like I'm really at that pump me up. I'm excited. So, before we begin, I always start the show off with some energy, with something. So I'll ask my guests, is there a quote or mantra that you live by? And could you give our audience a story about how you apply that quote or mantra to your everyday life?
Yes. So recently I was with a group of girlfriends. There was a women in color, like beauty expo called Project Beauty Expo. And we were just like chatting about work and just freelance and getting situated and just getting ready for like the new season. And I told one of my friends, don't prescribe to the panic. And she's like, oh my gosh, that's such a good quote. It's something I need to live by. And I think when you say that, it just means like everyone is so anxious and they think everything is so much more important than what you're doing and that they're the top priority. So I always remind myself, like, if I don't start panicking, I can get things done. So just because you're panicking or just because you're freaking out or you're stressed, I don't need to internalize that because I'm not going to be able to work my best or do all the things I need to do. So definitely don't prescribe to the panic. I know it's a culture of, especially in corporate America, like, you know, I don't know if I'm going to have a job tomorrow or like this person's going to take my role. But I think the more we just don't engage in that, you can focus on like yourself, your goals, doing the best at your job and kind of pushing forward.
That's a profound quote. I love that. So with that being said, though, was there a particular situation that happened over the last 6 months or 12 or a year or so where you said, hold up, when things could have got awry, you're like, yep, I'm not going to get that type of energy, and it kind of worked in your favor?
Yes, actually last week. So the one thing about freelance is it's very ebb and flow. And I've been very blessed this summer to definitely have a really fun summer of traveling and enjoying myself, but also getting really great projects. But I don't want to say like my personality or my energy, sometimes I get competitive and sometimes I start to get like very nervous. So I start to kind of overcommit myself. So last week, like maybe Wednesday, I kind of looked up and I'm like, oh my gosh, I have so many stories due. It's just me. How am I going to get this all done? Why did I get myself in this situation? It's way too late to turn back. And I called my dad and was like almost crying. I was like, you know, I feel like I've been doing well, but if I just had a full-time job, I wouldn't have to worry about stuff like this. You know, I could just go to work, leave at 5, get my benefits, continue on with my life. And he's like, listen, just take it one step at a time. He's like, don't freak out. He's like, you know, you went on a vacation. He's like, you took much needed time off. He's like, you didn't want to work while you're with like your other family members. So instead of freaking out, just think about it like now your time is your own. So if you have to stay up until 2:00 in the morning tonight, you can also sleep in until 2:00 tomorrow afternoon. You know, like there's no rules. So once I kind of pushed myself out of the overwhelm part of the day, I was just like, okay, like I can break it down, create a to-do list, prioritize what's going on, and then worst case scenario, actually reach out to people and just like, hey, can I have a little bit of extra time on this?
Yeah, that's it's crazy that I think growing up, when people say follow your dreams and do what you're excited about, be in your gift, I think sometimes I think they forget to tell you that there's a cost to that too. Like, and there's a cost that it's not like student loans where it may be pushed out. You can kind of keep extended 10, 20 years. No, a lot of times that cost comes like immediately. And especially when you're doing yourself full time, working with yourself. I mean, of course, you can wake up and you're doing what you love, where you're gifted at fashion, beauty, etc. But then what people don't realize is like, especially once you get a like after, not right after, college, but I mean, you got healthcare stuff. Like if you want to see the doctor now, okay, it's just a lot of other things that we don't really think about that can really be a lot of mental stresses and really can kind of, it can hurt the work that we put out or the work that we're trying to do in mental space. Because a lot of times when we do this stuff, when we're in our passion and stuff like that, we still want to be in our top notch mental space to deliver the best product that we can. And, I think that's really important. But before we jump into kind of what you do full time now, I want to go all the way back. Because I mean, I just jumped from Minneapolis to New York, which are way different, right? Like first time I went to Minnesota, yo, I was like, it was snowing so crazy. I could not get around it. Like anytime it was a great experience. Got to see the Mall of America. It was cool, but it was very cold. And I said, man, I will never come to Minnesota again. I love Minnesota, but I said, I can't come here again. And I had to go back early this year to go speak at a college, and it was snowing again. So kind of take us back before college, before BT, Guild, before full-time, consulting and all that stuff. Take us back to who you are and where you're from.
So one thing about the weather, I always joke because in New York, when it snows, people freak out. They're so like, work stops, the train's not running. And when I remind people in Minnesota, like it just snows. It never melts. So once it starts snowing in like October or November, it just continues to pile on and it's still below zero. So it's just there. So your winter is forever there. So that's the one thing I'm happy that I escaped. So Minnesota is interesting because my parents ended up because my dad was in education. He's from Illinois, and my mom is from Antigua, and she was a flight attendant. So she kind of bounced around to different airlines. And at that time, Northwest, which then became part of Delta, was based there. So everyone's like, how on earth did your parents meet in Minnesota? That's so random. So the great thing about my mom being a flight attendant is I got to experience a lot of things and go to a lot of places. So sometimes I'd have like a really fun time and I'd go on her flights with her, like sit in business class or first class. And then like we'd hang out in whatever city for a few days. So I know she did that with me. I think we went to London that way. She took me and my cousin to Thailand for like spring break. So that was really fun. But the one place I loved going with her the most was New York. So with the flight attendant schedule, the way it works is you get to pick your base and that's where your flight starts or like your work day starts technically. So she'd take a flight from Minnesota, go to New York, and then that's when she'd like start work. So I remember coming to New York with her a little before Labor Day to go back to school shopping. And I was watching like public access television. She had a shared apartment in Queens with like some other flight attendants. And I just remember seeing a segment about New York Fashion Week. And they're just, like, going backstage with the shows, kind of showing all the models walking down the runway. And I'm like, I don't know how I can be part of this, but like, this is what I want to be. So when I was younger, I really wanted to be a model. And I remember one of my second or third or fourth grade teachers, we kind of had like a presentation about what your career was going to be and you had to tell the class and what you wanted to do. And then they had not a conference, but kind of like a one-on-one with you after to just kind of talk about, it was very like advanced, kind of talk about like your goals and how can we get there? Like,
In elementary school?
Like, yeah, like it was very.
Did you go to a private school? Was this
public school? It was very savvy. So basically, I told my teacher, I was like, I really want to be a model. And she's like, well, I don't want to discourage you. She's like, I think that's a really good goal. And she's like, but what about other things? Like, you can also work in the industry being like an editor or, a stylist or a photographer. And I was like, I like a fashion editor. Like, that's cool. Like, I like reading all these magazines. I like looking at the pictures, reading the stories. So that kind of imprinted, like, I'm going to work at a fashion magazine. And ever since I was young, I'm very happy that I had like a very clear focus. There was never like, I think I want to be a veterinarian, or I want to be like, anytime my family or friends would ask me what I wanted to be, I was like, I want to be a fashion editor. So in school, Hampton required you to get a internship. So I went to Hampton University in Virginia, which I love, and I'll be back for my 10-year anniversary this October.
Shout out the real HU.
Yes, it's like true. So we had to, in order to graduate, you had to have an internship requirement. And I don't know if I was like slacking, or I don't know if I was just like having bad luck. I could not get a good internship one year. Like, it was just a struggle. Like, no one was accepting my application. I was really stressed out. One summer, most of my friends were like in New York having fun, and I ended up having to like go back to Minneapolis. But I got a internship at the Minnesota Spokesman Recorder, which is a very small newspaper. I'm not even sure if it's around anymore. And I got to shadow like one of their senior editors. So, I'd be like filing newspapers, not necessarily getting coffee, but doing like very menial tasks. But he was also very gracious. So he's like, what's the one thing you want to do? And I'm like, I want to write. I don't care what it is. I just need clips to build my portfolio. So he's like, okay, you can do like local business profiles on people. So I think I wrote, one of my pieces was about someone who was raising like chickens in the city, but they had like a really big like egg business. And then I got to write a fashion article about this man named Ini Ayamba, and he owned a really cool boutique called Ivy in Minnesota. And I did a profile on him, and I felt like that was like my Pulitzer Prize winning piece. Like I was so proud of that piece. I was like, I'm definitely going to get a good internship next summer. So I worked on the school newspaper. I kind of like grinded it out. I went to New York because I had family members staying there. So I started interviewing maybe in like April, like maybe March or April.
And this was your senior year?
This is my senior year.
Okay.
And I interviewed at a ton of places. So Jane Magazine was one of them, which folded recently. I think I interviewed at W Magazine, maybe Teen Vogue, and then, but it just didn't seem like a good fit. Like it just felt very scary, very Devil Wears Prada. And I was like, I don't know about these, and I don't know if I have enough experience to do it. So one of the internship opportunities I had was WWD. So me being from Minnesota, I didn't realize how pivotal and such a big deal that newspaper was, because it was a trade publication. So it would say like, you know, new collections, like who's moving where, trade store information. It's like if you worked in fashion, you read WWD every single morning. So I got a call back from them, and I had like an appointment maybe at like 9:00 in the morning. So of course I get there at like 8:30. But the way some of those old school media companies are structured, it's not like very like friendly and warm. It's kind of cold. So there's not like a really nice lounge to sit in. So you're kind of just like standing awkwardly in the lobby. So I'm standing awkwardly in the lobby forever. And I've told this story so many times. And I was standing there for like an hour, hour and a half. And like no one came down to get me. Like no one called the front desk to be
for
like,
an hour and a half. You just standing there. You just black in this place. You just
standing there, like just waiting. And all of a sudden this like panicked assistant, her name was Cameron, was like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Like Court went home with a bloody nose. Like he can't meet with you today. Can you come back tomorrow? And I couldn't come back tomorrow because I was supposed to like go back to school. So I was like, you know what? Sure. Like I can totally come back tomorrow. Like no problem. So I called my parents panicking, like, this is my last chance to get an internship. Like if I don't take this meeting, I'm not going to have anything. My parents like, okay, stay, like just miss school. It's fine. So the next day I came, and like Court and I hit it off really well. And he's just like, you have the internship. And I just think like that persistence was very telling of like, just kind of like what being and staying in the industry is. It's like, sometimes you just have to like make it work and kind of put your ego aside to get your foot in the door. Because it's like, once I had WWD on my resume, a lot of other things started like falling into place. I made a lot of really good contacts. I got really great experience. There's an editor named Bobby Queen who like took me on set all the time and let me write a piece. I actually got to interview Stacey Dash, which is very random because she had a lingerie line at the time. So I got like 2 little print features in WW. So it was an awesome experience. And that just kind of really made me realize like, okay, this is worth it to me. And this is something I want to pursue.
Man, there's a lot of things that you can take from that. But asking yourself, what do you say was the number one thing prior to actually leaving WWD and getting more experience within the industry? What is the one thing you took away from that whole experience, from seeing that summer where all your friends were in New York, but you was in Minnesota, getting it in and with their news department? And then at April, I'm talking about graduation in May, right? April, May. So you had 1 month and this is your last opportunity, and getting that opportunity. Like what was your one takeaway from those moments?
So this was actually junior year going into senior year.
Got you.
I think the takeaway is like, you just have to be patient, and it's like, you can't always look around and compare yourself to what other people are doing, which is really hard, especially with social media, like extremely hard. Seems like everyone's living their best life and making a ton of money and always on vacation, but you just have to wait your turn. And I think ultimately like putting in the work is the only value that you have, you know, like you can't necessarily skip steps. Like I had to get an internship in New York in order to get to the other places I wanted. Like I probably could have figured it out if I stayed in Minnesota, but it's like I had to take a chance and I had to be patient. And that manifested in many ways, like physically waiting in the lobby, like being uncomfortable, to, you know, maybe getting passed up for a promotion or not getting the dream, quote unquote, dream job that I wanted. You never know how your story is going to end. So when people also ask me things like, what's your 5-year plan? Or like, what will you be doing in 10 years? I'm always a little bit hesitant to answer those because things change so wildly and so quickly. Even the way media is now, like no one could have even dreamed of what it would be like and how fast the internet turns things around, and even how faster Instagram turns things around, and just the jobs that you thought would be there forever aren't there. And then there's new jobs like social media, like managers and directors that are currently around that weren't even part of our vocabulary, you know, a few years ago. So I think it's just being patient and also being nimble and flexible and just kind of seeing where things take you too, like planning, but not getting so obsessive about what exactly it is that you're going to do.
Love that. So now let's transition a bit. So before we kind of get to what you do today, I know you had a lot of experience. So when you graduated from Hampton, what was the next step?
I graduated from Hampton. I stayed home for a month and then I moved to New York. So I moved to New York without a job. My parents are like, listen, like you have 3 months to figure it out and then you need to come back to Minnetonka.
Did you stay like with friends or something for the 3 months, or?
I stayed with my cousin. So my cousin lived in Staten Island, which I was really lucky. So I got to stay with her. So that was also like a leg up because I didn't have to worry about like rent and like food and all that. So what was my first thing? I think I took like a few internships.
And not, mind you, for clarification, typically in fashion internships, are they paid or unpaid?
Unpaid. This
Oof.
is like before like legal things took action. So it's always funny. Like when I meet interns now, they're like, I have my lunch break. Like that's legally required. I was like, I remember being at like WWD until like 10 p.m. and like probably not eating. And like someone was like, okay, now you guys can go home. You know, like we had to be told to go home. Like you'd never go to your boss and like, oh, I'm sorry, I have a doctor's appointment. They'd be like, what? So it was unpaid. So I quit an internship. I remember that because they wanted me to get their laundry in like Greenpoint or something. I was like, hell no. Then I got a contract temporary gig at KCD. So KCD is a huge fashion agency in New York, public relations agency. So basically what they do is they represent brands and they also plan fashion week. So like a designer will come to them, like, you know, I want to have the show. This is the venue I'm thinking of. And they'll handle everything else from like the invite, guest list to like the music to like what does your stage look like. It's like really full service. Mm-hmm. So one of my mentors knew someone who worked there and she recommended me there. So it was like a month-long gig. So I was basically helping them stuff envelopes, but this was paid. So I was like thrilled. I was like, at least if I'm going to do something like I need to get paid for it. So I was like doing everything from like sending out invitations to dropping off invitations because sometimes they'd be hand delivered to certain editors. What else were we doing? The seating chart. So now it's a little bit less political, but before it was very specific about like if you had a certain title and you were at a certain magazine, you needed to be seated at the perfect spot so you could see the collection, especially if you're reviewing it but like a blogger, when they weren't as big, now it's like they all have front row, would be seated like further in the back because it's like they didn't quote unquote matter as much, but now things have changed. So that was kind of the gist of that job. From there, I think I interviewed a few more places, but I had a connection to someone at Victoria's Secret. Mm-hmm. So I had an amazing boss, and this was like my first woman of color boss. Her name's Nicole Gibbons, and she actually just launched a paint line called Claire. So I'm very proud of her. And she was amazing because she was kind but tough. She gave feedback, which I think a lot of people don't do as much. So if something wasn't right, instead of fixing it, she'd be like, okay, this is what's wrong with this, and I need you to fix this within like X amount of time. So sometimes, of course, you'd be frustrated, but it's like she really, truly made me have an attention to detail and like a pride in my work, no matter how big or how small it is, because she just reminded me, you know, these reports seem very trivial, but if the EVP of Victoria's Secret happens to read this, and they see a spelling error, that reflects poorly on you. Like they're not, you know, like they're going to think about all the people that led up to this report. So it doesn't get placed blame on one person. It's kind of the group collective. So it's like, mm-hmm. if you make a mistake, it's like everyone looks bad. And then from Victoria's Secret, I was there for about a year and a half. Really, really great experience. I was handling VSD, which is Victoria's Secret Direct. So they had clothing. So if editors like requested samples for photo shoots, I'd like make sure they got that, help with press releases. I worked with the models a lot. So when they had like bra launches, like I'd go to the store and like give them talking points and like make sure the news outlets had what they needed. So I got to meet like Heidi Klum and like Salida Eubanks. Who else was there? Doutzen was there. Alessandra was there. And of course the fashion show, which is absurd. It's so well organized. It's kind of crazy. Like just how many people it takes to put on the Victoria's Secret fashion show is wild. And now that it's international, I'm sure it's even more. So I stayed there for about a year and a half, and then. And
a quick question before you move on from that, because I think something I saw that's very pivotal. I know growing up, this is something that you dreamed of doing, like being in New York, being involved in fashion, and to have you actually work for Victoria's Secret and doing fashion show. Like, how did that make you feel? And then how did you continue to stay motivated and really encouraged to move forward? Because this is something you dreamed about, right? Victoria's Secret fashion show, boom, man. I don't know. I'm not going to age you, but early in your career, now you're working with the models, you're giving them advice, you're in the media. So how did that feel to kind of be able to accomplish one of your core dreams earlier in your life? And then two, what was that piece that kept you like inspired and motivated to kind of keep going after really hitting one of your major goals?
Yeah. I think since I was so young, I didn't think about it that much. Like I just kind of thought of like everything as a next step. But even now, I know like sometimes we'll complain about like, oh, I have to go to Fashion Week. It's so annoying. But to me, it's still magical because it's, to see the creativity and the things that go behind it and to just know how it works. It's like, it can be, I don't know, like it's, the amount of work that it goes to producing and putting on a show and like getting everyone organized is crazy. And to know that only lasts for maybe 8 minutes. The Victoria's Secret show is a little longer, but it's like something lasts for 8 to 12 minutes. That it's like people have been putting in work for months.
For real? It's like that?
Yeah, it's really quick. A fashion show is relatively quick. It's like a few songs.
8 minutes. And I'm talking about you have hundreds, maybe thousands of people that put like so much time into it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, because it's like if you design 30 looks, think about how long it would take you to walk down a runway and walk back. And that's just like how long it lasts. So I think that like knowing all the work that gets put into that's still kind of what makes me be like, I can't take this for granted. And also just to realize so many people don't get to see this. Like people don't ever get to be so close to something that they've dreamed of. If that answers your question.
No, the answer is spot on. So now you had that experience with Victoria's Secret and now you're moving on. So what was next?
So next was, when I joined the workforce, magazines were kind of in like kind of a weird space like they are now, where it's like it was kind of uncertain. A lot of closings were happening, a lot of consolidations, but I still really wanted to write. So when I was at Victoria's Secret, I was in public relations, but I'm like, I need to be a writer. So I was just trying to hold it out until things settled down. So there happened to be a temp opportunity at at Essence Magazine, but it was very temporary. It was like only supposed to be 2 weeks long, and there was no guarantee that it would pan out to anything. And I just remember talking to my boss about it, and she's like, listen, like you have a long-term contract with Victoria's Secret, and we're working really actively to get you hired full time. So I'm not trying to discourage you, but you also want to think like you're leaving something pretty stable to go into something relatively unstable. And at that time, again, because I was so young, or maybe I was just like a risk taker, I was like, I think it's going to work out. And she's like, okay, girl. And she's like, she's like, if you need to come back, like, let us know. But it's like, if we hire someone, like, I can't guarantee you're going to have a role here anymore. So I went to Essence, and basically the temp project was to clean out the closet. So to people who don't necessarily have like a close relationship with fashion. So the fashion closet, anything you see in a magazine that's shot or that's on a model or that's kind of on the pages laying down is borrowed. So you call it in from a PR company. So like, let's say I represent like Gucci. You'd email someone at Gucci and be like, hey, we're working on a story. Sometimes you request a specific look. Sometimes you have like a vague category. So you might be like, we're looking for red sweaters. Do you have anything that can work? Then either Gucci will send a messenger or you'll send a messenger. It will come to the the fashion closet, where you have like assistants and interns who are basically like opening the bags, checking things in, the kind of like writing down all the details, like the condition it came in, where it came from, and organizing it accordingly, because there'll be several shoots going on at the same time. So it's like you might want to put the red sweater on the red rack versus like if we're doing like a glitter story, it's like those glittery items go on another rack because different editors will be calling in different things. Mm-hmm. So at the time, the fashion editor was no longer there. I think they were transitioning out of their fashion assistant, or she got fired. So I now had the job of trying to figure out where all these things that I had no relationship with or like no past experience with, where they went and who they needed to go back to, because you don't get to keep anything. So after the shoot's done, it's supposed to get sent back. So imagine like hoarders, and there's just like this racks and racks of clothing and like bags and shoes and jewelry, and it's just shoved into a closet.
Wow.
And I had to figure out where things went. So some things are easy because it's like they have labels on them, but just because it has a label on it doesn't mean it goes back to the place. So it's like it might be part of an agency like KCD that represents multiple brands, or it may belong directly to the company. So I was like making telephone calls to be like, does this sweater belong to you? And trying to figure out where things go and slowly send them back so they can clear out the closet so they can prepare for other shoots. So that's what I was doing for like 2 weeks, day in, day out, basically by myself, and trying to just hope and pray that we didn't receive an invoice, because if it didn't go back, then the company would then bill you for it. And like, think about it. Some of those gowns are thousands of dollars. It's fine jewelry that's priceless, essentially. So the goal was to make sure that they didn't incur any fees, and I had to kind of figure it out.
Wow. So it took you 2 weeks on the dot to finish it all?
Yeah. I mean, there are records of some things, but for the most part, like I remember calling Brazil because there's a swimsuit company, and they're like, you can keep them. Like, don't worry about it. Okay. But yeah, it was just, and then at the end of 2 weeks, then they were like, we really feel like you were super organized. We have other projects, so like now you can kind of help maintain the closet. So I was temporary, kind of every 2 weeks, I'd find out if I was going to stay for another 2 weeks. The beauty team happened to see that I was super organized, so they wanted me to do the same thing with the beauty closet, except they don't have to send things back. They get to keep them, but just organizing them in a manner. So it's like all the lotions go together, all the face creams go together. And then if there's any comp, so a comp would be something where it's just like a tester, maybe it's a prototype, those would go back, but those are few and far between.
So this is all at Essence. And then you transition, because I know the reason why I'm sticking and I want to drill down this experience, because I mean, I always say all experiences, as you already showed earlier in your story, you never can take them for granted. And a lot of times those lead to kind of what you do in the full-time space. And I want all my listeners that tune in every day basis to kind of see the value in where their current experience is at. Because a lot of people that listen, their current experience is not where they want to be. Like they have ambitions to do all this other stuff. But the way you were so meticulous in all these tasks, from standing in a lobby for an hour and a half to cleaning out 2 weeks, just cleaning out a closet. You could have been like, yo, I was just helping out people with fashion show, advising models. And now y'all want me cleaning out a closet? Like I gave up maybe a potential full-time opportunity there to clean out closets. You could have been half-assed with it. So I'm just trying to kind of continue to show this thing. So what made you leave Essence then?
So Essence, I had a unique experience with a boss that turned out to be very stressful. But I will say, I don't necessarily like when people are like mean or nasty or difficult to work with, but I think it also makes a stronger worker because you focus on your work. And I think I quickly realized at a young age, which I really liked, is that people have their own things going on, regardless if it's right or wrong. And my responsibility is only to do my work. My responsibility is not to fix whatever is going on in your life. My responsibility is not to then get low self-esteem because of this. So there's a lot of situations where it's like, I probably should have quit, but I was like, why should I sacrifice my dreams because the person I'm working for is like miserable? You know what I mean? I'm not going to give up what I'm doing because they can't handle what's going on with them. So I ultimately ended up going freelance after that. I just needed to kind of take a step back and think about, what I wanted everything to look like. But I still think that was a good experience because it made me compartmentalize about feedback. Like I was constantly getting feedback from her, but also it made me a better employee because it's like, even though it was difficult, a lot of people are like, you were a great assistant. They're like, we can't, regardless of what she says, like you were on top of it. It's like I was handling everything from like expenses to cars to like writing stories in book to managing the closet to managing the interns. Like I just did so many things. But, having someone who's not the kindest to you isn't great, but also reminding myself that not every boss I have will be a mentor to me. And I think that's important for us to realize too, like not everyone is going to be this fairy godmother, godfather who's constantly giving advice and constantly giving you praise. Like sometimes people are really tough on you, but it just reminds you that, again, it's about the work.
Wow, that's crazy. I really never thought about it. And that's a very interesting take, because I could see how when you're focused on your work instead of, not to say you shouldn't focus on relationship with your manager, et cetera, but I see so many times a lot of advice that we give is like, have a good relationship with your boss, have a good day with this. But then if your work is substandard, then when managers change and say, if you're not able to get a good relationship, and then you're mad because they're mad at your work, but you realize you never really looked at your work like that. You spend a lot of time focusing on relationships, building with colleagues, but then you're like, why is my career not advancing? Because you never had anybody give you real critical feedback on a consistent basis. And when they did, you said they're just mad at me. And
like you took it personally. I think it's very hard not to take things personally, but I think ultimately making friends at work is a bonus. Like I didn't really start making friends. I think guilt, I obviously had like friends at Essence that I still keep in contact with, and not really many at KCD. But I think the first time where I felt like the people I work with were like my actual friends and I wanted to spend time with them outside of work was guilt. But guilt was also like a very unique working environment where they kind of fostered that. But in magazines and traditional media, it's also very competitive. So you don't really want to be friends with the people because you're nervous that, you might tell them too much and they might try to take your job. Or if, there's two assistants and you guys are best friends and an editor spot opens up, what does that look like for your relationship? Because now I'm going to be reporting into you. You know what I mean? So I think girls, you befriend other people outside of your not publication. Yeah, publication, but so competitive.
Things are going to get awkward once it's like, hold up, there's only one position or somebody got to get fired. And then she gets fired. So it's like, we're still humans. They're going to be like, so it just creates a lot of unneeded tension. Like, unless y'all just really vibing like that, this ain't the time of the place. You got one mission and one mission on. Focus on that work and get it done.
Yep.
So I know I want to get to kind of what you do today. So how did you transition from working with these companies into now becoming your own full-time freelancer, getting into branding consultant? Like what was the trigger, and then how did this kind of transition begin?
Yeah. So to kind of like fast forward, because I know it's a long story, I think after Essence, it made me realize that I needed to think about alternative ways to be in the industry, but maybe not be so close to the industry. So for me, I think being in a magazine, even though I ended up going back, I was like, I need to think really hard about like the next publication that I go back to and like what exactly I want to do. So once I left Ebony, I went to another public relations firm called HL Group, and I was doing like skincare and fragrance PR. So the one thing I really loved about PR is like it really makes you good at relationship building in a different capacity. So I think a lot of us think give or take, or just want, and ask. But we never think about how we can like reciprocate that on the other end. So the great thing about being a publicist was I had to kind of track everyone's moves. So it's like if people left the company, if people got promoted, if people got hired someplace else, I'd always be responsible for like sending flowers and sending a thank you card on behalf of the public relations firm, or like, I'd take people out to breakfast to kind of see like what stories they're working on or what's going on. But I always tried to make like meaningful connections and like remember stuff about people. So beyond just sending you products, it's like, if you mention that, your mom was sick, it's like I'd send a follow-up note to be like, hey, and P.S., I hope everything's going okay with your mom. Like, let me know if you need anything, like in a real human to human way. So with that, once I left HL Group to go to Ebony, because one of my coworkers at Essence was there, still doing the same thing. So a lot of like market work writing. When I went to Gilt, it was very different because it was e-commerce, and that's something I'd never done before. And once I kind of got settled in Gilt, I think part of Gilt was fatigue of the industry because we also had a really small team. And you're just thinking about like the longevity and like how long could you keep this up without getting burnt out. So I kind of like really settled into like a true 9 to 5 role at Guilt. Like Guilt was very like structured but loose, very startup culture, very young, very energetic. So the first like maybe year and a half, I was just really enjoying like getting to work at 9:30 and leaving at 5:30. Like I'd never done that before because like at magazines, it's like you get like I remember the mornings where I get there at 8 because we'd have a shoot. And then I'd be there until midnight because I needed to prep for something the next day and then do it all over again. And like at that time, I was like coming from like Staten Island or the Bronx. So it's like this long commute. So it's like I felt like as soon as I woke up, it was time for me to go back to work.
Yeah.
So at Guilt, once I kind of got settled into my like 9 to 5 life, I was like, you know what? I've built all these great relationships. I don't really get to interact with people on the same level. I should freelance write. Like I should just email some of my contacts and see if they just need people to write stories or if they have assignments or something. So I started very slowly because I didn't want to overwhelm myself. So maybe it's like I do like 2 stories a month or like 3 stories a month. And it just kind of like snowballed. So it wasn't necessarily something that I intended on doing, but it's great to make extra money. So it was nice to just like, you know, get a little check in the mail or get a direct deposit. So then probably like the last year and a half or 2 years of Guilt, I really like pursued it like full speed ahead. Like I was like, I will take on as many assignments as I want. And it was kind of a sacrifice because obviously I had a full-time job. So it's like I'd be doing stuff on nights and weekends. So it's like I was kind of missing out on certain things or maybe I couldn't go to a party. But to me, it was kind of worth it because I always reminded myself that nothing is forever. You know, there'd been several rounds of layoffs that happened at the company. So it's like, I just want to make sure that if something went down, I have something to keep me afloat. Like I'm not starting from scratch. I'm not starting from zero. I have something else going on for me. And I also think that was a good balance for myself because I could still be creative in the way that I wanted, but I didn't have to deal with like the politics and the drama of like being at one of these publications or one of these companies, or even, you know, when you idolize something so much, you're like, oh, I feel like it's so great to work there. It's like I could still kind of keep that mystique about some of the places I loved and just, you know, get the bottom lines and get about getting into it.
Nah, that makes a lot of sense. And so now, okay, you felt that, and then you leave Guild, and now you not start from scratch because you've already been maintaining and building some clients. But I know we talked to a pre-call about your focus, and I think you talked on it briefly when you were as a publicist, building and maintaining relationships. And I think this is where the Meeting the Podcast comes in that everybody can relate to, because whether you are in business for yourself or you're working for a company, relationships building and maintaining is really critical. So I have 2 questions for you in regards to this. One, I want to start on the opposite end. So for those people that have had trouble really building functional relationships and they don't have a history of doing that, maybe they have a history of being transactional or just not really putting a lot of stake into it. How can they kind of, what kind of habits or strategies or things that can they do to kind of get back or get on the right side of building strong relationships?
Yeah, I think the first question to ask yourself is, why do you want this relationship? Why do you want this meeting? Why do you want to ask this person for advice? What do you want to talk to them about? Because sometimes I think we just get so caught up in like people's titles or what they do or if they look, or if they're cool or if they're stylish. But it's like when you boil it down, it's like, how can this person really help you, or how can you really help them? And like, what is the benefit of this? So I think once you whittle that down, you can kind of think about like, what are the commonalities that you have with someone? When I send blind emails, I try to research the person a little bit more, like whether it's an editor or a brand or a contact. If I do something generic, it's like very broad sweepings, but then it's like I'll still add a little bit of a detail that makes it personal. So like, you know, hey, Greg, like just saw you got back from vacation. Hope you had a really great time. You know, hopefully your workload's not piling up too much. But if it is, I'd love to be considered for any assignments you might have. Like, let me know if there's anything I can do to help, or, you know, if you want pitches for particular stories. So out of all the emails you got, like I kind of hit that, like, I figured out a little something about you, which isn't like too stalkery, but then it's like, I'm also providing like a service to you. Like, I'm not asking you for anything. But if I did want to get to know you, I might be like, you know, hey, Greg, like came across your website on, like the internet. I think you're doing really great work. I'm trying to do something similar. If you have a few minutes to chat, let me know if you want to talk, and like we can talk about like collaborating or doing something. But I think when you say things like collaborate or pick your brain, sometimes that also turns people off. So I think you just need to be a little bit more particular about who you do it with as well. So if you see someone who seems to be very open to mentoring and getting to know people, if you see someone who's an entrepreneur who's in startup mode, like they may not have time for a business meeting with you unless it's something that's like financially gainful, but it's like maybe you could introduce them to someone, but I think it's just trying to find connections, ways to actually help, but truly thinking about like, why is it that I want to get to know this person? And that should cut a few people from your list. Cause if you're just like, oh, I don't really know, then it's probably not a good connection. And it's like, it's probably not something you'll be able to maintain long-term anyways. I'm saying it wrong, but it's like, build the bridges before you need them. So it's also, don't just reach out to people when you need something. It's like, sometimes you can ask people if they need something or just check in. Like, it's really also nice to have a note from someone to be like, hey, I read your article and I thought it's great. Glad to see everything's going well. Like, that's just such a nice note to receive, It's like, I don't want anything from you. I'm supporting you in a way. And if you have time to connect with people, I do think there is a culture of people being like, let's get together. I think you shouldn't tell people you want to get together unless you really plan on following up and trying to see them. Because I do think that's like an awful feeling of like someone, like anytime you see someone like, hey, yeah, hit me up. Like we should totally.
Oh man.
And it just never happens. You're like, just say hi and like keep it moving. Like don't volunteer that we're going to do something. But yeah, it takes work, but I think it's also, those are the people who pull through for you. Like a lot of the business I've gotten or a lot of recommendations are all old coworkers. Like all the times that I'm like, it's bleak and I'm like, I'm not going to make any money. Like one of my old coworkers hits me up and they're like, hey, I'm connecting with my friend who's launching this, or like, oh, I heard so-and-so needs writers. I'm going to recommend you, or like just a direct email intro, or someone out of the blue will email and be like, yeah, I ran into Greg the other day and he was like saying you're an excellent writer and I have a project I'd like to keep you in mind for. So I think that's when it also proves to be fruitful for me to keep those connections alive. And it's like, I'll send people flowers, I'll send people a card, I'll take them out for a drink. Like I always want to seem very gracious that they're still thinking about me like years later. And I try to do the same for people a lot. Like I'm always offering to introduce people. And I know people are like, you can't give your contacts like that, but it doesn't hurt me to give someone else a leg up. So for example, I met with a brand yesterday who's talking to different copywriters and we were talking about like PR agencies. I'm like, oh, I'll give you a list of people I enjoy working with. And she's like, really? I'm like, yeah, like if you guys want to build a fruitful relationship, you want to have an agency that has good relationships. I'm like, but you could likely find this out on your own, but it's like, I also don't want you to launch your brand and you have a terrible agency and it's like, you're not getting the benefits that you are, because it's like, if I got hired and then you have to cut retainer and cut costs because the brand's not making any money, I could have helped you out by making sure you got a good agency. So I think like also sharing your contacts with people as well is helpful to you too, making those introductions, because ultimately the relationship is yours. Anyone can find an email address on the internet. Like it's not hard. I don't own anyone's email. It's not hard to crack those codes. It's your relationship. So it doesn't harm you to share those when necessary with people.
Yeah, no, you gave a lot of game, but I think one big thing I took out of it is once you see something specifically online on media and you're like, wow, that's phenomenal, then go ahead, like right then and there, either putting it on your to-do list, but I would recommend if you have time, especially if you're at the crib or you scrolling or whatever, go ahead and send that email away or that text or maybe even that phone call to let them know that, yo, I'm proud of it. Don't just comment below. Don't just comment below. Like if you send that text, hey, I just saw what you got going on, man. Continue doing your thing. Proud of you. Like I was like, yeah, that's crazy, because I mean, we probably go through that every day around 3, because everybody put their highlights on social media anyway. So we see probably 10, 20, 30 opportunities every single day to really just show people love or to reconnect briefly, not get paragraphs and like that, just real briefly. Yeah. And even if you say 2 a day, if you maximize that times a whole month, that's 60. Maximize that's a whole year. Something's good gonna come out of it. Even if like, I wouldn't say like you should scheme that way, like, oh, I guess that, but say 600. Hey, I see what you're doing. Continue doing it through. Something's gonna come from that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I feel like I probably send so many emails that like never get a response, but at the same token, it's like then I get a response and then it's worth it. So it's like the 100 emails that I sent for like new business pitches. It's like even if 3 people respond, that's 3 contracts I didn't have before. So it's worth my time.
Heck yeah. And even though, and there's been emails like specifically because I know, there's been emails where people have sent that I did not reply back. But I did read, and I tell those people if we come in contact, I do appreciate you sending that email out of everything. Like it means those people jump up friends that I've had for years because I've read the email even if I didn't reply. So there's always a narrative, and so I'm glad you're sharing some of those tools and tips with the audience because I think that can help a lot of people out in their business relationships because like you said, so many of us when we're trying to launch something new or we're trying to do this. We start to build that bridge and it's like, bruh, if you would just set something like a little bit beforehand and really just start to cultivate it, then it's easier to prime people to do stuff. You just can't come out, hey, I'm launching this I'm writing a book, come to my book release. Bruh, it's been like 3 years since we talked.
Exactly.
But, no, that's great. So as we kind of transition to, towards as we close, like, what advice, one, would you give to somebody that's trying to break into the beauty industry? Cause I know I've had a lot of people specifically on college campuses that are so intrigued and enthralled with beauty and fashion and getting in that. And it's a small community. It's a small community and they're very nichey. So what would you advise that young woman or that young man out there that is looking to break into the fashion world?
I think people have to remember that no one is going to self-promote yourself as much as you will. So it's like taking the responsibility off of like, well, Greg knows someone at this magazine. It's like you have to also take control and be, okay, like, what am I going to say? How am I going to promote myself? What are the opportunities I'm going to create for myself? So I think early on in my career, you can sense that like I was really good at like making small opportunities into big ones. Like I didn't necessarily overstep, but I also took them very seriously. So even when I had to take that internship at a magazine or the newspaper in Minnesota, I still made sure I got a fashion piece, but I also did the work ahead of time. I think you also really need to know the outlets and the publications and the editors that you want to get in contact with. I can't tell you the number of times that I interviewed a future intern or a future assistant and they knew nothing about me or they knew nothing about the publication or the company. They just knew that it was cool. And it's like, it's not enough for you to just think it's cool. Like I need you to know like the ins and outs or like a recent article or like news about the company, like something that shows that it's more than kind of a checklist or a check mark off your to-do list. I think also not counting yourself out of things before people tell you no. So I'm not saying that if you're a senior in college, you should apply for a director level role. But at the same token, like maybe you're like, I don't want to be a fashion assistant. I've had enough experience and perhaps I can go for this associate role. Apply, because the worst thing that can happen is like you're not qualified enough for this. But when we have another role that fits your experience, then you have the opportunity to be considered. So I think sometimes people kind of freak themselves out. But you can also take a chance on yourself because, you might have said the right thing or someone may resonate with your story or they might be from your hometown. Like there's so many other factors that come into the hiring process. But I really think it's becoming a great reader and writer. A lot of people today, because of the internet, things just kind of get slapped on. I still think there is details matter because it's like certain people read things and there's so many typos. I can't even bear to finish this. But really practicing. So it's like whether you're writing in your journal or if you just have a good idea and like you just bang it out, everything doesn't have to be public facing. So it's like if you write a really great article about like lipstick trends and no one sees it, at least you're honing your craft. So I think sometimes we want the rewards of stuff, but we don't want to do the work. And it's like you can do the work on your own. So if you see an article and you're like, I could have written that better, like let me research this and kind of like craft my own thing. That's practice because it's like the more you do something, the better hopefully you get at it. And coming to the table with your own ideas. So if you're like, I want to write for this outlet, just look and see like, what's missing on the site? What's something that you can contribute? What's your point of view? What makes it unique? and reaching out to the person, like, I love what the website's doing, but I noticed that you don't have any content for women of color with natural hair. Here are a few ideas. Would love for you to consider to write these. So let me know if you're interested. That's making someone's job easier, which I think that's like the main thing about relationship building. It's not always about you. It's like, how am I making this person's day easier? How am I offering a benefit? Because now, granted, if they don't need it, they'll be like, hey, I am swamped, but like someone did reach out to me with story ideas. Let me hit them up and see if they can take this last minute assignment. You know what I mean? Like, you've already built that structure and that kind of that enthusiasm about something before they needed it. So things like that, I think, help.
Man, that's some phenomenal advice out there for anybody. I mean, what just kept coming to my mind is like what you said, building your own bridge. Like a lot of your bridge is not just applications you fill out online. I think a lot of us misconstrue that. Even people that are outside of college, your bridge is not just filling out the application, because everybody's filling out applications. Everybody has great applications, but going the extra step in whether it's fashion or whatever industry it is, looking at these websites, contacting these people, and always have that mindset. How can I take something off your plate, etc. Yeah. I mean, wow. And I think you said something huge. I was like, wow, I never thought about it like that. Is a lot of people, instead of practicing on their own, now we live in a society where people are practicing on public platforms.
Exactly.
And if you're not in a space where you're talented enough, then you're going to be looking like a fool on a public platform because you're not ready yet. So you need to practice in the dark. And then when you come into public, like, make it exciting. And now it's like, look at my blog post. Don't look at your blog post when you just like, you're not even there yet. Nah, because then people going to say, oh, your work is trash already. So I love that, the epitaph. So now to your work now as a branding consultant, one, can you break down your niche specifically for those in the audience that may be looking for maybe your services? Can you break down specifically what you do as a branding consultant? Because I know there's branding consultants get thrown out a lot now. Yeah. And I always try to make sure when I bring people on, even when I'm just having conversation, try to see what niche they are in the branding spectrum.
Okay. So branding is not new to me because it was something I was doing at Guild, but new to me in the sense of something that I'm doing on my own. Mm-hmm. So most of my day consists of creating story ideas, pitching them to outlets, and working off of assignments. So, let's say right now I'm preparing for September stories because we're like a few weeks out. And with the internet, which is nice, is like you don't have to plan so far in advance, but you also want to get on people's like radar on their calendar. So it's like maybe I'll look on different websites, or like I might have had conversations with friends and I'm like, oh, that's a really great idea. So I kind of type those out on a list and then I'll tier them based on my outlets. And I think that also, I don't know if that necessarily sets me apart, but I try to make sure that whatever I'm pitching to editors or pitching to the people I work with makes sense for their outlet. So it's like I can't talk about, the best blonde shampoos, like maybe if it's like kind of like how to care for your colored hair, but it's like most women of color aren't naturally blonde. So it's like maybe that's something that belongs on like a Vogue.com because it suits their audience. So really being like mindful and intentional about like what I'm pitching to make sure that it's a good match and kind of ensure that people are accepting my stories. So then the other part is working with different brands, which kind of entails a lot of things like, what does your bio say? What's the tone of voice that you hope to bring to, like, your consumer? How are you naming the products? How many blog posts or what type of editorial extension are you going to have? What does your welcome email trigger say? So all the things that people forget that actual people write, right? So it's like even an automated email was written by someone. Like it's only but so automated, and a lot of that stuff can be custom. So we'll be kind of meeting with the brands and just talking through like, who's your consumer? Like what are words we use? What are words we don't use? And then kind of like with beauty brands, giving them like a little bit more advice about like how can they stand out in the market? What are the things they actually need? What are the things they don't need? Because the great thing as an editor, it's like, yes, you're wined and dined and, people take you places. But ultimately, it comes down to how great is this product and how easy is it to understand this product. Even now, the tough thing about working from home is that people will send things for consideration here. So it's like my living room is just covered in products. But if people don't have like a strong brand messaging, or they didn't have like prior communication to myself, I don't know what this shampoo is supposed to do. So I'm not going to use it, and it's going to go in the giveaway pile. But it's like if their publicist was proactive and was like, hey, Janelle, working on a new brand launch, would really love for you to try this shampoo. I noticed that your hair color is currently this. Let me know if you want to try something, or if we can get you in for a service. That's more intriguing to me than like just receiving a mystery box. So reminding brands that it's such a cluttered market and they have to stand out. And what is it that's going to make you stand out? Also continuing the conversation. So a lot of people will launch with like 40 products and forget that your initial press is essentially what's going to carry your brand through. So if you come out with like this big splashy launch and you're talking about your 40 products, unless you now have something new, there's nothing else to say if everyone's covered it. So it's like, does your founder have a cool story? Do you have a science background? So it's not like now you can be considered as an expert for certain articles. Is there a special ingredient that you use? So it's like also making sure that they're thinking about their products 360, and they're also thinking about who are our spokespeople within this company that can also serve as experts to kind of carry on our press. So kind of advising them about that, like making sure that they have a good crafted story. It just kind of varies, but it's like sometimes it'll be really small. So like I've worked with ad agencies where it's like they're just trying to figure out like how can we pitch new business, like what are the things we need to say, or what's like a creative angle and editorial angle. It really depends.
Yeah, that was very robust. And I know you don't try to think about the future that much, but in this space, there's specifically like in the future for the work that you do you think that you may want to form an agency one day, or right now you're just taking it day by day and seeing how it kind of goes?
So yeah, that's funny that you said that. I toy with the idea of creating an agency, but I think it's more so on the sense of how can I gather like creatives of color and kind of vet off projects. So it's like if a beauty brand was like, we're launching this brand, we want to make sure that we speak to minorities. How can we do that? Then I'd be like, okay, I have a writer for you. I have a photographer for you. I have like, a graphic designer for you. It's just kind of figuring out like how does that work? What does it look like? How does everyone get paid? Like all that jazz. But it's like, I'd love to do something where it's like, I can use my connections and kind of like vet off projects, because I think sometimes writing, while it's amazing and I love it, it can be overwhelming. And it's like, you want to use another part of your brain. So it's like, sometimes it's more like strategy and like new business pitching and meeting with people, because that's never a problem for me. But sometimes it's like getting the actual work done as a solo person. It's like, it would be really nice if I had like a collective of people to kind of brainstorm, throw things out to, or just even like reassign them to.
That's exciting. I think that's definitely a need. It's crazy. I was just about to say like collective, and I can imagine like an Odesk of black beauty people that are in different niches or something of that nature. So that's some cool stuff. I know as we're kind of getting down to the end, I know we still got a culture change round and something like that in our future, but I did want to ask, and I try to ask every person that's on our show to highlight within their career thus far, their in any order they want, their best moment, and then the moment that they learned the most. And so I don't like to say their failure or anything like that, but sort of highlighting the learn the moment, and then the moment where you're like, yo, this is why I do it. I'm excited. Boom.
I think the highlight would definitely be figuring out that I'm okay on my own. I think for a long time I was very, not wrapped up per se, but I was very aware of like, what title am I affiliated with? Or, am I a director? Am I a senior editor? What my publication is, because it gives you a sense of clout. But I think also reminding myself that ultimately, like, my name is my name, and that's the only title that I need to be concerned about. So feeling confident to be like, okay, like I've done it, not like I've done enough. Like there's definitely times where I'm like, there's so many other things I can do, but you've reached a point where it's like you can walk out on your own and maintain your relationships and like earn money and be okay to keep yourself afloat. So I think that was like, because it was a very long conversation with my friends and like life coaches and career coaches and like my family, and everyone's like, if you don't just take a chance on yourself and like remember that it's like if it doesn't work out, you can technically go back to the workforce at the end of the world. I think a learning point for me would be negotiating and realizing that, like, again, you're the only person who can make sure that you're okay. And there'd been situations like early on where it's like I definitely lowballed myself and I definitely got myself into bad contracts or bad situations, or I didn't ask for what I wanted. And it's like then once you start doing the math, you're like, how did I end up making like $8.50 an hour? Like, what is going on? You know what I mean? Like, it's like once it's like it sounds like a lot, like you get this crazy contract, but then it's like you start doing all the work and you're like, wait a second, if I'm working like 60 hours on this, I'm paying myself so low, it's not even worth it. So I think definitely having those moments where I'm like, I got to stand up for myself, or it's just like I got myself into like a bad deal, would be like learning moments. And also being a little, I think the way to resolve that is being more open with money and with your immediate circle. So I know it's tough to talk about finances and people don't love it, but I find myself with like my other freelance friends, we're doing a better job of like, hey girl, like someone asked me to do this. Is this rate crazy? And they're like, don't do it. Or people are like, ooh girl, take it. Like, you know, just something where it's like, at least you're getting feedback, because ultimately if someone's going to do something for $18 an hour and your rate's $75 an hour, they're going to go with the person for $18 an hour. Like, you're not going to get the contracts you want. So it's like, I need the person who's at $18 an hour, if we're at the same level, to raise their rates. So people just know, like, this is what it is. It's like, this is how much it costs if you want this. And also being able to say no to people. Like, there's been a few situations that's like, I was bummed, but it's like, I'm like, if you want this, like, this is my rate and I can't lower that for you, because it behooves me. And it's like the next person, I want them to also have a high rate. So you understand that if you're getting someone with a certain amount of experience, this is what it costs. Like, my rate is my rate. I can't make it or break it for you, because you want to be cheap, because essentially you'll get cheap work. So I think people definitely like sharing more information, being a lot more open, advising their friends, advising their like immediate circle about what's going on. I think that's helpful too.
Man, that's crazy helpful, because I mean, I think about it all the time. Before I hung out with other speakers, because that's what I do like full time, I speak, I didn't really know how much I should be charging. I saw stuff online on Google, and then I was telling some of my other friends, I was like, oh yeah, I just got 500 for this. It's like 500? What you did? You did an hour and a half for $500? Like, what are you doing, Greg? I was like, oh shit, I thought I hit a lick. It was like, no, dude, like we got an hour job, it's $36.50, and then we add X, Y, and Z. And we were on like at the time at the same level, but I didn't think about it. So now anytime that I have something, I try to be ultra transparent about, okay, how things getting broken down, etc. Because if not, you could be thinking that you're killing it or you're doing something and you're grinding. I remember there was times where I was doing a whole school. I'm talking about hitting multiple classrooms, doing a big thing, and I was getting paid basically pennies. And I mean, of course I was cutting my teeth getting started, but still, I mean, I just think that having those people that are at your level, even above your level, and I think just really checking in with that humility piece, that people that are maybe above your level, that may even be younger than you. Because in the speaking industry, there might be somebody that's 25, 26 that is making more than me and is above my level, but still having that comfortability in yourself to really still ask those questions, to be humble and take their advice.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, my last question on the future round before we transition to the culture change round is, when it's all said and done, like, how do you want to be remembered?
Oh my gosh, that's hard. I went to a David Bowie exhibit in Brooklyn and started crying because I think people forgot how much work he's done and just the body of work. So like between the costumes and the songs and the collaboration, and it just really got me thinking about like, what is it that people are going to remember me for? You know, it's like, what body of work am I creating? So I think now I really want to be mindful about what I'm putting out there. I think there's a lot of noise and there's truly too much content, which kind of sounds crazy coming from a writer, but it's like, there's just so many things to be aware of. So it's like, some days it's like, we care about like what Blac Chyna's hair color is, but then like the other day we care about like women's fertility rights. There's so much information. So it's making sure that you're being very intentional and thoughtful about how you're presenting things, because it's just out there now, whether it's true, false, real, fake. it's hard to decipher. Anyone can write something and put it up on the internet and like we think it's true. But trying to go like a little bit deeper. So it's like if I'm writing an article I just did something about vitamin D levels in African Americans. So the issue there is that a lot of African Americans are diagnosed with low levels of vitamin D, but according to doctors, they're like, well, the test is faulty because it's like the way that what people of color synthesize the sun is very different than Caucasian. So it's like technically we need less. So it's like now people are taking supplements, and there's also health issues and complications that can come from having too much vitamin D. But it's like giving both sides of the story. So some doctors like absolutely like people of color do need vitamin D. But at the other side, I also want to present that, maybe there is something to this. So then you as the reader can leave with a choice and a decision about how you want to react. And also you can have a conversation with your doctor now. Be like, okay, well, I read something that this test isn't exactly accurate. So tell me other methods that I can maybe fix this without taking a supplement and like putting myself at risk. So kind of thinking about stories like that, like, is this useful? Is it helpful beyond entertainment wise? But it's like, how can it kind of push us forward and think in a new way? So those are kind of the pieces that I'm trying to work on more, spend more time in, rather than like the frivolous, like, 6 new lipsticks to change your look. Like that's important because it's like that might help you if you're having a bad day. But ultimately I want something that is a little bit more like long-standing or impactful and making you think about yourself and the world and, just less frivolous.
Wow. Right when you said talking about vitamin D, I was like, it made me think, oh, vitamin D levels? Like what in the world? That's something that I would look into and just kind of gravitate towards, because that's something, especially I wouldn't expect from people that's in the fashion industry to kind of, and if there's a way you can kind of mix that, I mean, I think what I have seen online and what I've seen some do tactfully is people that are in, say, for instance, I see a lot of sports writers that do have interesting takes on political issues and everything else. And it always is interesting to, especially if I follow your content for for the way that you write, and then seeing you write about something else specifically, because, some of your biggest experiences from when you started was choreographing business people. Like looking at interviewing business people doing those type of stories. So you didn't start necessarily right in fashion. Like you have you take your perspective on just analyzing different perspectives in general. So not just putting yourself in, I guess, in that one niche, right?
Yeah. And also just not underestimating your audience. Like sometimes they want that information. They're just not being presented with it. So it's like if every day it's like we're writing about like entertainment news or something celebrity based, if you give them something real, like they may react to that. So it's also meeting people where they are. Like, it can be a funny take. It doesn't have to be serious, but you still want to present them with information. So it's like, at least you saw it. So whether you put it into practice or not, at least you have a little bit more information, or you are thinking about things in a different way.
Boom. So as we transition, this is our last round, our final round, culture change round. I got 5 rapid fire questions. Hopefully I get rapid fire answers. You ready to go?
Yeah.
What is the best piece of advice that you have never received?
I can say that when I have questions about things, I'm not hesitant to ask. So I'm not one of those people who's like, let me just figure this out by myself. Like I really am not a do-it-yourself type of person. Like professionally, yes, but it's like when it comes down to like the nitty-gritty, I'm never trying to be like, let me cut corners and just like do this on my own. So I can say that I've gotten really great advice from like friends, colleagues. There's people I can always call, always text if I'm like concerned, confused, overwhelmed. People talk me out of situations all the time. So I feel like I've received really good advice, and hopefully I haven't missed out on anything.
If you could add one habit and take away one habit, what would they be?
If I could add one habit, it would be focus. I can get very like deep into something. Well, actually, let me take that back. I always say that I'm very focused, but I'm not super disciplined. So that sounds weird. I'm focused because it's like if I want to do something, I will like focus in on it. Discipline means like how long will I stick with this? So whether it's like I'm going to work out every single day, it's like I'll be focused on that goal, but I may not like actually put it into practice. And if there's something I could take away, it would be spending. I feel like I have a financial advisor who's very great and he like keeps me in track, but I just think like I live a very, not even expensive lifestyle because I have a contingency budget, but I still haven't connected with the fact of like what I earn is what I have to live on. So it's like I can't keep spending as if it's never not going to stop. It's not going to stop because I'm going to keep hustling so it doesn't. But in the sense of like sometimes I need to chill and just be like, okay, like you can't be doing all this. Like you just have to sit down for a second.
That's real. What would you say is your favorite book or movie and why?
Favorite book. I just read a book by one of my friends from college, Wyatt Timore, called She Would Be King. And that book brings me to tears. It's such a beautiful story. It's basically, not to give too much away, but what it would be like if we were not slaves for as long as we were, and if we had the ability to save one another. And it's just like very in the theme of like Wakanda and like just thinking about like what would Africa have been like or what could we have been. It's just such a great story. It's like three main characters and just like how they interact and you know what it's like when they move to Liberia. It's just a really great story that I need everyone to purchase when it comes out in like September, October.
Definitely. I'll definitely have to do some research. If you could just send me a link to kind of the because I always put that in my website link, and it sounds like a very needed and deep book, and I'm always into like those deep reads. What would you say? Go ahead.
Oh, then you asked for a movie?
No. I was like, because sometimes people, some people just do audiobooks, or some people are like, well, I don't have a book. I'm like, well, do a movie. So I just always try to give people that option as well.
Yeah. No, She Would Be King by Wyatt Timore. Definitely a great book.
Got you. What is your biggest fear?
Sometimes running out of money, and that seems crazy, but I think
that doesn't seem crazy. That's real. I don't lie to you.
In the sense of like, I think I don't necessarily money for like financial gain, but I think money is a resource, and running out of money in the sense of like making sure that it's like my kids, my grandkids, like they have a nest egg to be able to do what they want. And just like many options and really thinking about like wealth for the future and, you know, what does that look like for them? Because I think the great thing about my parents, they're always very, very supportive of me. And they're also very cognizant of like what we're leaving behind or the choices that they made or the sacrifices they made. So for me, it's like making sure that it's like, I'm not, you know, living this lavish life for myself, but thinking about how can my kids, my grandkids, my nieces, my nephews, like all that jazz, like also enjoy some of the things that I have.
I always, at the end of every podcast, ask my guests this one question. This is outside the culture change route. I appreciate you for those answers. Everybody that comes on my podcast, I call a culture change agent because they're doing something to change the culture in their own right. So I said, it's only right that we end our show with this. If you could change one thing about society, most specifically our African-American culture, what would it be and why?
I think getting rid of the competitiveness we feel with each other, like really looking at ourselves as a community as a resource, and also thinking about ways to collaborate with each other. So I think whether that means something as simple as like, let's say I can't afford a brownstone. It's important in Brooklyn right now because it's like there's so much gentrification happening. So it's like if 5 friends could get in and just like not really think about like how do the logistics work and blah, blah, blah. But it's like just like, okay, we're going to come together. We're going to get this. This is something we're investing for the future. How can we do this together? Also bringing people in. So it's like not being so happy or excited to be like the only one. Like I don't, even when people ask me for like writing advice, I always readily give it because it's like, the internet is so vast. It doesn't matter if there's 12 other beauty writers because it's like there's not that many Black beauty writers anyways. So it's like it also helps me because then it's like eventually I'll get to see the content that I want to read and I want to see, and then other girls of color will be inspired. So really being less competitive with one another and being like, you know, there's really room for all of us. As corny as that sounds, it's like there's no short, like you can do anything you want. And if you just focus on like being the best that you can be, like you'll stand out. You're an individual person. You have a unique point of view. So you don't really need to worry about what everyone else is doing. But you also shouldn't prevent anyone else from pursuing their dreams or pursuing the career that you currently have.
Couldn't have said it better myself. That is phenomenal. So, I mean, I just want to say thank you as we close for providing such a phenomenal stories, phenomenal gems and jewels I learned a lot myself from this. I know the audience will as well. So I want to say from the bottom of my heart and Minority Trailblazer Nation heart, thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
And before we go, how can we keep in touch with you and find out more information about what you got going on, your services, and just stay up to date on the movement?
So you can keep up with me on Instagram. I'm at jmargaretbeauty. I also have a website if you ever want to read my clips or my stories, and that is janellmhickman.com. And all my contact information is on there as well.
Love that. So Minority Trailblazer Nation, all that information will be in the show notes. As far as links to books, all the stuff that we talked about in this podcast will be in the show notes. So Minority Trailblazer Nation, every single podcast, I ask you to do two things. One, make sure you leave a review and share the podcast. Two, make sure you're changing the freaking culture. Good night.